programme. Good to talk to you, as ever, Sumi Samaskanda there in Milwaukee. She'll be here with World News America a little later. Well, earlier this year, you may remember, we spoke to the student journalist, Quinn Mitchell, who'd been to over 100 political rallies, throwing questions at all the candidates who were running to be president. This was part of our interview in January, around the time of the New Hampshire primaries.
Nikki Haley is closely guarded, closely scripted. She has not wanted to take my questions in the past, been prodded and shouted by her staffers.
Quinn is back with us. Good to have you with us. I just wonder when I thought of Nikki Haley climbing onto the stage to endorse Donald Trump tonight, you were the first person I thought of. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I anticipate Nikki Haley to change her messaging to best fit her prospects in 2028. That's who she's been on the campaign trail for a while. She did take the heat to Trump after New Hampshire in South Carolina when Trump got real personal with her husband's military deployment. But listen, this is an outreach to the middle ground where Haley supporters sit. And like you said earlier, how will the crowd react to that? You know, last night, a woman said she voted for Biden in 2020, and the crowd booed her. So I wouldn't be surprised if the crowd is very, very hostile tonight, because like you said, this is Trump's party, and I will be very interested to see how this plays out.
What about your home state of New Hampshire? It's been nearly a quarter of a century since a Republican carried New Hampshire. You'd have to go all the way back to George W. Bush in 2000. But the governor, Chris Sununu, who endorsed Nikki Haley and who's been one of Donald Trump's most vocal critics, he says your state is very much in play now. It's a coin toss as to how it might go. Does it feel like that to you?
Listen, I say the voters in New Hampshire are very independent-minded. If they think, I don't think they're very party aligned. So if they think they see something in Donald Trump, they're going to vote for Donald Trump. They're not very party aligned. There was a recent poll that showed Trump up by a couple of points. Last election, I would have said absolutely not. New Hampshire is not in play. At this point, I'm not really sure, because there's just so many polls right now that show Trump up in swing states by like 3 to 5 points, and at North Carolina, and he's only losing Virginia by like a point. I would say it's unlikely that Trump takes the state, but I wouldn't rule it out a possibility, because if I know if my voters think Trump is, or the voters in New Hampshire think Trump is more up to the job, they will probably vote Trump.
Right, because it is going to be a turnout election, and one of the concerns within Democratic circles in New Hampshire is that they won't get out the base. Do you pick up some of that when you talk to people?
Yeah, I would say that there's real fear amongst Democrats that they don't turn out their base. And I would also say that a majority of voters in America are just really discontent about the two candidates we have in November. I mean, just talking to my peers, I mean, Gen Z especially, we want someone young. So it'd be interesting to see how Vance could appeal to younger.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. Does he? I mean, yeah, I don't know your politics. I don't pretend to understand your politics. But do you recognise something in him? I mean, he's clearly the future. Is it good to see a 39-year-old in the race as opposed to some 78-year-old and a 78-year-old and an 81-year-old?
Yeah, I got to see the guy 6 months ago. I got to ask him a pretty tough question on America and racism, and I went up to him afterwards, and he let me follow up 3 times. I thought his handlers would jump in, but he let me follow up 3 times. And that is something I'd never really seen before, and these are the same handlers that covered the other MAGA candidates. So I know the guy, and frankly, it was a very confident pick by Trump to pick J.D. Vance. This is not an electoral play. This was a play for the next generation of Republican leadership. And I really do hope that Biden will recognize that and will match that in some extent. Because I know if he does that, that will inspire my generation to turn out more if we get a younger person on the ticket. As far as J.D. Vance appealing to young voters, I'd have to see how his messaging is. I know if he's had a few problems, or he's had some interesting messaging around abortion, which is a topic that troubles Gen Z. So I'd be very interested in how he is in that debate with Kamala Harris.
Really interesting. Always good to get your thoughts, Quinn. Thank you for going on the programme again.
Thank you.
We'll touch base with Quinn perhaps a little closer to the election, but we don't get the views of younger voters enough on this programme, so always good to hear those thoughts, and particularly from a swing state like New Hampshire. As Quinn suggests, those public calls from Democrats for President Biden to bow out of the presidential race are not as loud as they were before Saturday, but privately the efforts to urge him to rethink still continuing.